October 11th, 1927, 9:15 in the evening. The auction house on Clermont Street, 3rd floor, behind the unmarked door with the brass number plate turned green from rain and time. She stood on the platform in the center of the room. The wood beneath her feet was polished smooth, dark oak that reflected the light from the chandeliers overhead. Her dress was pale gray, simple, falling to her ankles without decoration. Her hands were folded at her waist. She did not move. 11 men sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle before her. Their suits were tailored in London, their shoes handmade in Italy, gold watches, platinum rings, faces lit softly by the warm glow of the lamps along the walls. They did not speak to one another. They did not acknowledge one another. Each man sat alone, separated by careful distance, by velvet armrests, by the unspoken rules of men who own too much to risk appearing weak. The auctioneer stood to her left, a thin man in his 50s with silver hair and a voice trained to carry without shouting. He held a leather folder in one hand, a small wooden gavel in the other. He cleared his throat twice before speaking. No one had asked him to begin. He was nervous. He was always nervous when the buyers were this important. "She is unregistered," he said quietly. "No existing claims, no debts. She has been educated. She speaks 4 languages. She is compliant." The word compliant settled over the room like dust. It was the word they had come to hear. She did not react. She had learned years ago that reactions were invitations. If you gave people a flicker of emotion, they would seize it, interpret it, own it. So she gave them nothing. Her breathing remained steady. Her gaze remained fixed on a point beyond the men, on the far wall where the wallpaper had begun to peel near the window frame. The bidding began. Numbers were spoken in low voices, each figure larger than the last. The amounts were staggering, enough to buy buildings, enough to fund revolutions, enough to erase entire histories if necessary. The men did not hesitate. They raised their hands slightly or nodded once, and the auctioneer acknowledged each bid with a murmur and a notation in his ledger. She listened. She counted the voices. She noted the pauses. She began to map them in her mind, assigning each voice a position, a tone, a rhythm that might reveal something useful. One man sat in the 3rd chair from the left, younger than the others, perhaps 40, dark hair, clean-shaven, navy suit, silver tie pin. He bid twice, then stopped, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. Another man sat near the center, older, heavier, with gray hair and a thick mustache. He leaned back in his chair, one hand resting on his knee, the other holding a cigar that had gone out. He did not bid often, but when he did, the room grew quieter. A 3rd man sat at the far end, nearly hidden in shadow. He had not moved since the bidding began. He had not bid at all. He was watching. That made him dangerous. When the bidding reached a sum that would have stunned anyone outside the room, one of the men raised his hand and spoke. He was seated in the 4th chair, lean and gray-eyed, with a voice that carried without effort. "We should be practical," he said. The auctioneer paused, the room stilled. "Joint acquisition," the man continued. "Equal shares, equal access, it makes sense." A ripple moved through the room. One man chuckled, low and brief. Another leaned forward slightly. The younger man with the silver tie pin frowned but said nothing. The older man with the mustache took the cigar from his mouth and examined it as if the answer were written there. 11 shares, someone said from the back. No disputes, no complications. The auctioneer swallowed. He glanced at her, then at the men. He knew better than to object. When men like this reached consensus, objection was pointless. "Agreed," another voice said. One by one, the others nodded or murmured assent. The decision formed itself with elegant efficiency, as if it had been inevitable all along. She lowered her gaze at just the right moment, not in submission, in calculation. This was better than she had hoped. 11 instead of 1. 11 doors instead of a single locked room. 11 egos instead of one overwhelming shadow. She kept her expression neutral, but inside something shifted. The gavel fell once. A soft knock against wood. "Sold," the auctioneer said. No applause followed. Applause was for public victories. This was private. Two attendants approached the platform, both young men in black uniforms. One gestured toward the side door. She stepped down and walked without hesitation. Her steps were measured, her breathing controlled. As she passed the row of chairs, she felt their attention like heat against her skin. Some stared openly. Others watched from the corners of their eyes. One man leaned forward slightly, as if to speak, then stopped himself. She wondered if he sensed something, some misalignment, some faint disturbance in the pattern they believed they had created. The car waiting outside was black, long, armored. The windows were tinted so dark the interior was invisible from the street. Rain ran in sheets down the windshield. The driver stood beside the rear door, holding an umbrella he did not offer to her. She climbed into the back seat without assistance. The door closed behind her with a heavy, final sound. The locks engaged automatically. She sat alone in the leather interior. No restraints, no guards. They believed she had nowhere to go. That belief was their first mistake. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the sparse traffic of the late evening. Through the tinted windows, the city looked distant, unreal. Streetlights blurred past. Figures moved on the sidewalks, bundled against the rain, oblivious. She watched them for a moment, then turned her gaze inward. 11 men, 11 voices, 11 patterns of breath and hesitation and control. She began to catalog them. She assigned each one a place in the structure she was already building in her mind. The estate appeared after half an hour. High stone walls, iron gates that opened silently on concealed hinges, a long driveway lined with trees, their branches bare and skeletal in the rain. The house itself was massive. 3 stories of gray stone and tall windows, lit from within by warm yellow light that spilled onto the wet gravel. It looked secure. It looked impenetrable. It looked like a place designed to contain things. The car stopped beneath a covered portico. The driver opened her door. She stepped out into air that smelled of wet stone and old leaves. 2 attendants waited inside, a man and a woman, both middle-aged, both dressed in plain black uniforms. They did not speak. They led her through a marble entrance hall, past closed doors and silent corridors, up a wide staircase with a banister carved from dark wood. The house was quiet, but it was not empty. She could hear voices somewhere below, muffled and indistinct. She could hear footsteps on another floor, the faint hum of machinery, the creak of old wood settling. They showed her to a room on the 2nd floor. It was large, a bed, a wardrobe, a writing desk, a chair by the window. The walls were papered in pale blue. The floor was carpeted. A lamp burned softly on the bedside table. It was comfortable. It was pleasant. It was a cage dressed as a sanctuary. "The rules will be explained tomorrow," the male attendant said. "Meals will be provided. You will be expected to be available when summoned." She nodded once. The attendants left. The door closed behind them. The lock clicked softly, almost apologetically. She stood in the center of the room, listening. The house had a rhythm. Ventilation hummed in the walls. Footsteps passed in the corridor outside, fading into distance. Voices rose and fell somewhere below, already arguing about schedules, privileges, arrangements. She crossed to the window and looked out. The ground stretched away into darkness, bordered by the high stone wall. Beyond that, the city glowed faintly on the horizon, distant and unreachable. She turned from the window and sat on the edge of the bed. She folded her hands in her lap and closed her eyes. She breathed slowly, evenly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. This was not the first time she had been bought. It was not the first time she had been locked in a room and told to wait, but it would be the last. She had made that decision years ago, in another room, in another city, after another transaction. She had decided then that she would not simply survive. She would dismantle. She would unravel. She would turn the machinery of control back on itself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but wreckage and silence. The 11 men believed they had purchased compliance. They believed they had acquired something passive, something beautiful and silent and easily controlled. They did not know they had invited a mirror into their lives, one that would reflect their worst impulses, their hidden fears, their carefully buried cruelties. They did not know that she had spent years learning how power worked, how men like them thought, how systems of control could be exploited from within. They did not know that she was patient, that she was ruthless, that she had nothing left to lose. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The plaster was smooth, painted white, unmarked. She listened to the house settling around her, absorbing its sounds, its patterns, its rhythms. Tomorrow she would begin. She would watch. She would listen. She would learn their names, their habits, their weaknesses, and then, slowly, carefully, she would start to pull the threads. Morning came without sunlight. The windows in her room faced east, but the sky remained overcast, heavy with clouds that promised more rain. She woke early, long before the attendants arrived. She spent the time examining the room more closely. The wardrobe contained dresses, all in muted colors, all cut to flatter without drawing attention. The writing desk held paper and pens, but no ink. The drawers were empty. There were no mirrors. That was deliberate. They did not want her to see herself as anything other than what they had decided she was. The attendants arrived at 7. A woman brought breakfast on a silver tray. She set it on the desk without meeting her eyes. Toast, fruit, tea steeped to perfection, no poison, no message, nothing dramatic. Control here was subtle. They did not need threats when comfort did the work for them. She ate slowly. She noted the quality of the food, the china, the silver. Everything was expensive. Everything was carefully chosen. These men valued appearances. They valued the illusion of civility. That would be useful. At 8:30, the male attendant returned. He was tall, perhaps 50, with thinning hair and a carefully neutral expression. He introduced himself as Mr. Calloway. He was the house manager. He explained the rules in a calm, measured voice, as if he were describing the weather. She was not to leave the estate. She would be notified in advance of appointments. Her comfort would be prioritized. There were cameras in the public corridors, none in her room or the private suites. The masters valued discretion. She nodded. She asked no questions. Questions would come later when she understood more. "There are 11 of them," Mr. Calloway said. "They will introduce themselves in time. Each has his own schedule, his own preferences. You will be expected to adapt." She met his eyes. "I value discretion as well," she said softly. Mr. Calloway flinched, just slightly, just enough. He concluded the briefing quickly and left. The door did not lock immediately. A pause, a test. She remained still until it closed. The House of 11. That was how she would think of it, not as a prison, not as a cage, as a structure, a system, a mechanism that could be understood, navigated, and eventually dismantled. She spent the rest of the morning exploring the boundaries of her freedom. The door was unlocked during certain hours. She was allowed to move through the public corridors, the library, the sitting room, the conservatory with its tall windows overlooking the gardens, but always under observation, always aware that someone was watching. The house itself was a study in wealth and control. Every room was decorated with care, art on the walls, sculptures on pedestals, furniture that had been chosen not for comfort but for statement. One wing favored minimalist steel and glass, everything sharp lines and cold light. Another was decorated like a museum, walls crowded with paintings acquired for value rather than love. A third wing felt almost domestic, plush couches, family photographs carefully placed to suggest warmth, normalcy, virtue. She moved through these spaces slowly. She observed. She cataloged. Every hallway was a sentence, every room a confession. The first of the 11 arrived that afternoon. He was the one who had proposed joint ownership at the auction. He was courteous, controlled, proud of his self-restraint. He spoke to her as though she were an intelligent investment, something rare, something worthy of maintenance. "You will find this arrangement mutually beneficial," he said. His smile never touched his eyes. Stability has its advantages. She met his gaze. She let silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. "Stability is underrated," she replied. He left satisfied, believing he had set the tone. She filed him away. The diplomat, the one who believed himself reasonable, the one who would be easiest to manipulate because he believed himself immune to manipulation. The second arrived in the evening, younger, restless, always glancing at his phone even when it was face down on the table. He asked her questions about her education, her interests, as though curiosity alone absolved him of guilt. She answered selectively. She offered truth stripped of context. People rarely noticed when truth was incomplete. By the end of the first day, she had met 6 of them. Each interaction was brief, controlled, different in texture, but identical in assumption. None of them considered the possibility that she was listening more closely than they were speaking. None noticed how she adjusted her posture, her expression just slightly, to reflect what each wanted to see. She had learned mirroring years ago, in places far less luxurious than this. It was a skill, a weapon, a way to make people believe they were understood when they were only being studied. The 7th arrived late, already irritated by something unrelated. He paced as he spoke, complaining about rivals, regulators, the incompetence of people who were not him. He spoke freely, recklessly, because he believed the room itself was loyal. She filed away names, phrases, half-finished thoughts. Anger made people generous with information. That night alone again, she replayed the day like a map unfolding. She placed each man in a mental room. She connected threads between them. 2 were competitors pretending otherwise. 1 was dependent on another's silence. 1 was terrified of scandal. 1 was already cracking under pressure. They thought they had bought compliance. What they had actually purchased was attention. Days passed. A rhythm formed. She was given clothes chosen to flatter without empowering. She was given freedom within boundaries that felt generous only if you ignored the walls. She was allowed books, carefully selected, nothing recent, nothing political. She read them anyway, marking passages in her mind, training patience. The house staff avoided her when they could, but not all of them. 1 maid lingered once, hesitating near the door. They watch everything, the maid whispered, barely audible. "I know," she replied. The maid nodded. Relief flickered across her face, as though being understood was a kind of rescue. She left quickly after that, but something had shifted. Even in places like this, cracks existed. The 8th master arrived with gifts, jewelry, silk, things meant to impress or intimidate. He spoke little, preferring observation, his eyes sharp, calculating. She recognized him as the most dangerous kind, not cruel for pleasure, but for efficiency. He would be the hardest to unbalance. The 9th never met her alone. He always insisted on staff present, witnesses arranged like shields. His fear was almost visible, radiating from him in careful smiles and formal language. He had secrets that screamed to be discovered. The 10th treated her with exaggerated kindness, as though kindness could erase context. He spoke of charity work, of foundations and public service. He wanted to be admired, not just obeyed. She gave him exactly enough admiration to make him careless. The 11th did not arrive at all. Days went by before she realized his absence was deliberate. He was watching from a distance, gathering reports, studying patterns. He was patient. That made him interesting. One afternoon, during a rare moment alone in a corridor, she noticed a door left slightly ajar. Inside was a study, walls lined with screens, security feeds, financial dashboards, a map of the estate rendered in precise detail. She did not enter, she did not even slow her pace. She simply noted it, fixed it in memory. There would be time. At night she dreamed less than she used to, Dreams were luxuries. Instead, she planned. She refined timelines. She imagined conversations that had not yet happened, arguments that could be nudged into existence with a sentence placed just right. She began to ask questions, small ones, harmless ones, questions about preferences, routines, opinions. She framed them as curiosity, as a desire to please. Men like these underestimated curiosity when it came from someone they believed beneath them. Answers accumulated. She learned who trusted whom and why. She learned who was lying to the others and who was lying to himself. She learned which accounts were vulnerable, which alliances were brittle, which egos were starving. One evening, as she was escorted back to her room, Mr. Calloway stopped her. "You are adjusting well," he said. She smiled faintly. People adapt when they must. He hesitated, then added, "The masters appreciate discretion." "So do I," she said again. This time the words carried weight he could not quite explain. When the door closed behind her, she stood still for a long moment, listening to the locks engage. She placed her palm against the cool surface and breathed steadily. They believed the house belonged to them. They did not yet understand that houses, like systems, could be turned against their owners, not by force, but by precision. The House of 11 was no longer just a prison. It was a laboratory, and she was done observing. The first fracture appeared so quietly that no one recognized it as danger. It began with a conversation that was not meant to matter. She was seated in one of the smaller lounges, a space designed for comfort rather than spectacle, soft lighting, neutral colors, furniture arranged to encourage intimacy without warmth. One of the masters sat across from her, the careful one, the diplomat. He spoke idly about markets, about the instability of alliances, about how loyalty was an illusion people paid too much for. He was not speaking to her, not really. He was speaking to the idea of himself as a man who understood how the world truly worked. She listened. At the right moment, she tilted her head. "Is that why you keep your accounts separated?" she asked gently. The question landed lightly, too lightly to cause alarm. It sounded like curiosity, like admiration even. He paused, for a fraction of a second, not long enough for anyone else to notice, long enough for her to see the calculation flash behind his eyes. "It is prudent," he replied. "You never know who might disappoint you." She smiled, of course. She did not ask another question. She did not push. The seed was planted. The power of it lay not in what she had learned, but in what he now believed she might know. Elsewhere in the house, tension simmered. Two of the men had begun to avoid one another without acknowledging why. They shared history, investments gone wrong, a partnership dissolved quietly with lawyers sworn to secrecy. In public, they were cordial. In private, they circled each other like rivals forced into the same cage. She noticed how one spoke too carefully when the other's name came up, how the other drank more on evenings when rumors of mergers reached him before confirmations did. One afternoon she found herself seated beside the younger one, the restless one, the one who checked his phone as though it were a lifeline. He was agitated, tapping the glass of his drink with a fingernail. "You ever feel like people are setting you up?" he asked suddenly. She did not answer immediately. Silence, used properly, was an invitation. "I mean," he continued, "you think you are in control, and then suddenly everyone knows things they should not, like the walls are listening." She met his eyes. She let a flicker of concern cross her face. "Are they?" He laughed, but it was sharp, humorless. "That is what scares me." Later that evening, she mentioned casually to another master that the younger one seemed stressed, that he talked about being watched, that perhaps pressure was getting to him. "People crack," she said softly, "especially when they think they are alone." The master frowned. He did not like instability. Instability drew attention. From that moment, the younger one was no longer just restless. He was a liability. Information moved through the house the way air did, unseen, unavoidable, shaped by architecture. She learned which staff members talked, which listened, which pretended not to hear while remembering everything. She never asked for favors, she never made demands. She simply noticed, and occasionally she understood someone out loud. That was often enough. One of the men invited her to walk the gardens with him, the one who hid behind kindness. The estate grounds were expansive, meticulously maintained, a controlled version of nature that mirrored the house itself. As they walked, he spoke of philanthropy, of how misunderstood wealth was, of how people wanted villains when the world was more complicated than that. "We provide jobs," he said earnestly, "stability, growth." She stopped walking. She looked at a statue nearby, a marble figure frozen in triumph. "Stability for whom?" she asked. He laughed uneasy. "Everyone eventually." "Eventually is a long time," she replied. He changed the subject. That night she overheard raised voices through the vents, not shouting. These men did not shout, but tense, clipped exchanges, accusations wrapped in polite language, questions that sounded innocent but were anything but. Someone's name had been mentioned in the wrong context. Someone had shared something they should not have. The house manager grew paler with each passing day. He began checking systems twice, then 3 times. He reassured the masters that everything was secure, that nothing leaked, that privacy was absolute. She wondered if he believed that, or if belief was simply part of his job. The 8th master finally spoke to her at length, the efficient one. They sat across from each other in a room that felt more like an office than a living space. Screens glowed softly behind him, displaying information she could not see. "You are very observant," he said. "People are interesting," she replied. He studied her. "Interesting people are dangerous." She met his gaze without flinching, only to those with something to lose. A smile touched his mouth, brief and sharp. "You are clever." "So I have been told." He leaned back. "Do you know why you are here?" "Yes," she said simply. "Then you understand your position." "I understand the position you think I am in," she corrected. For a moment the room felt smaller. The screens hummed softly. "You should be careful," he said at last. "Curiosity can be mistaken for ambition." She inclined her head. "Ambition is only a threat when it is underestimated." He dismissed her soon after, but when she left she knew something had shifted. He no longer saw her as an asset to be managed. He saw her as a variable. Variables made people nervous. The 9th master made a mistake. He believed witnesses protected him. He believed that if others were present, truth would stay buried. But people listened differently when they thought responsibility was shared. During a formal dinner, with staff moving quietly around the table, he spoke too freely about a past deal, a deal that had never officially existed. He used a name he should not have. He referenced a place that had been scrubbed from records. She did not react, but later, when she spoke privately to another master, she said, "It is strange how people remember things differently." "Differently how?" the man asked. She shrugged. "I suppose memory is selective." The next morning the 9th master requested a private meeting with the house manager. By evening he was pale, sweating, insisting on extra security. Fear, once introduced, spread quickly. The 11th master finally appeared. He arrived without ceremony, without announcement, no entourage, no display. He found her in the library reading one of the approved books, her posture relaxed. "I have been watching you," he said. "I assumed you were," she replied, turning a page. "You do not behave like someone who believes she is owned." She closed the book. "Ownership is a story people tell themselves." He smiled faintly. "And what story do you tell yourself?" "That I am exactly where I need to be." He studied her for a long moment. "You are enjoying this." "No," she said honestly, "I am using it." He laughed quietly. "You are dangerous." "Yes," she agreed. Unlike the others, he did not threaten. He did not warn. He simply nodded once and left her there, alone among the shelves. That night the first real rupture occurred. Documents were leaked, not publicly, not yet, but internally. One master confronted another with information that could only have come from inside the house. Voices rose, accusations flew. Old alliances shattered under the weight of suspicion. Who had spoken, who had listened, who had betrayed whom? No one thought of her. She sat in her room, listening to the echoes of conflict ripple through the estate. She allowed herself a single slow breath. This was no longer observation. This was momentum. They had believed power was loud, visible, enforced. They were learning too late that the most devastating force was quiet, understanding applied with patience. And the House of 11, once a symbol of their control, was beginning to turn inward, walls listening, secrets breathing, foundations cracking under the weight of their own arrogance. She lay back and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would press a little harder. The collapse did not announce itself with sirens or headlines. It began the way most true disasters did, with denial. The morning after the leaked documents surfaced internally, the house felt different, not louder, not quieter, but sharper, as if every sound carried an edge. Footsteps paused too long outside doors. Conversations ended when someone unexpected entered a room. The staff moved with practiced neutrality, but their eyes betrayed them. Everyone could feel it now. Something was wrong, and no amount of money could smooth it away. She noticed the first sign while eating breakfast alone. The tray arrived late. It had always arrived precisely on schedule. Control depended on predictability. When the delay stretched to nearly half an hour, she knew it was not an accident. Someone had argued. Someone had countermanded an order. Authority had hesitated. When the tray finally came, it was delivered by a different attendant. A man this time, stiff-backed, his hands shaking just enough to be visible. He avoided her eyes entirely. "Everything all right?" she asked gently. He swallowed, of course. He left too quickly, nearly forgetting to close the door behind him. She did not touch the food. Instead, she listened. The house had a pulse now, irregular and fast. Doors opened and closed more often. Voices bled through walls despite the insulation. Somewhere in the West Wing, two men were arguing, not heated, but precise, surgical. The kind of argument where every sentence was designed to wound without leaving evidence. By mid-morning she was summoned. The message was polite, it always was. A request to join 3 of the masters in one of the conference rooms. No explanation, no warning. She dressed carefully, choosing simplicity over allure. Power did not need decoration today. Power needed clarity. The room they chose was the one with the long table and the screens lining one wall. It was meant for strategy sessions, not comfort. When she entered, the air felt tight, compressed by expectation. 3 men sat waiting, the careful one, the efficient one, and the man who had hidden behind kindness, a triangle of tension. "Sit," the careful one said, gesturing to a chair opposite them. She sat. "We have a problem," the kind one began, folding his hands as if in prayer, "and your name has come up." She raised her eyebrows slightly. "In what context?" The efficient one leaned forward. "You ask questions." "I listen," she corrected. "People answer." "That is not the same thing," he said. "Is it not?" she replied calmly. The careful one interjected. "Information has been circulating. Sensitive information. Information that should not exist." She nodded slowly. "That sounds unsettling." "Do not play games," the efficient one snapped. "We are not fools." She met his gaze. "I never assumed you were." Silence followed, heavy, testing. The kind one sighed. "We gave you access, comfort, protection, and now we are dealing with instability." She leaned back slightly. "Instability existed before I arrived. I simply noticed it." The careful one narrowed his eyes. "Are you threatening us?" "No," she said softly. "I'm explaining cause and effect." The efficient one stood abruptly, packing once behind his chair. "You need to understand your position." "I do," she said, "better than you think." He stopped packing. "Then explain how documents internal to our operations found their way into the hands of people who were never meant to see them." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Did they leave the house?" "No," he admitted. Then she said gently, "The breach is not external." The careful one slammed his hand lightly on the table. "Enough. We did not bring you here for riddles." She leaned forward now, just slightly. "Then you should not have brought me at all." That did it. The kind one flinched. The careful one stiffened. The efficient one smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. "You forget yourself," he said. "No," she replied, "I remember myself. That is the difference." For a moment she thought they might punish her, remove privileges, confine her further, do something dramatic to reassert control. They did none of those things, because punishment required certainty, and certainty was exactly what they no longer had. "You will limit your interactions," the careful one said finally. "No private conversations, no wandering, no curiosity." She inclined her head. "As you wish." They dismissed her quickly after that, eager to regain composure. As she left the room, she felt their eyes on her back, not with desire, not with confidence, but with calculation tinged with fear. They were beginning to understand. Restrictions followed immediately. Escorts doubled. Schedules tightened. Doors that had once opened with silent efficiency now required authorization. The house manager hovered constantly, his voice brittle, his reassurances hollow. But control applied too late only revealed how fragile it had always been. The first master fell that afternoon, not literally, figuratively, completely. He was one of the quieter ones, rarely assertive, content to profit from proximity rather than dominance. He had believed discretion made him invisible. It did not. An emergency call pulled him away from the estate. When he returned hours later, his face was gray, his movements mechanical. He went straight to his wing and locked himself inside. By evening, the others knew. A regulator had opened an inquiry, assets frozen, accounts flagged, not publicly yet, but close enough to smell the smoke. "How?" one demanded. "Who talked?" another asked. They searched for a traitor among themselves, because that was where betrayal had always lived. She heard about it secondhand from a staff member whose hands shook as she poured tea. "They are tearing each other apart," the woman whispered. "They always do," she replied. That night, raised voices echoed through the halls long after midnight. Accusations sharpened. Old grudges resurfaced. Deals once sealed with handshakes were re-examined with suspicion. One man stormed out of a meeting, slamming a door hard enough to rattle the glass. Another drank too much and spoke too freely to the wrong person. The efficient one watched it all carefully. He summoned her again. Alone this time. This was a mistake. They met in a smaller room, stripped of excess. He did not offer her a seat. He did not pretend at politeness. "You orchestrated this," he said. She did not deny it. "You think you are smarter than all of us." "No," she said, "I think you are predictable." His jaw tightened. "You think ruining one of us gives you leverage." "I think you ruined yourselves long before I arrived," she replied. "I am simply accelerating the timeline." "You are playing a dangerous game." She smiled faintly. "So are you. The difference is I do not mind losing." That unsettled him more than any threat could have. "Why?" he asked suddenly. "Why do this?" She considered him for a long moment. This was the first time anyone had asked the question without arrogance. "Because power that believes itself untouchable rots," she said, "and rot spreads." "You will not walk away from this," he warned. "You do not get to destroy men like us and disappear." She stood. "You would be surprised what disappears when people stop looking in the right places." He did not stop her from leaving. The second fall came faster. Two masters turned on each other openly. Their rivalry no longer contained by manners. Lawyers were called, threats implied, a partnership dissolved overnight, billions evaporating into litigation and spite. The house became a battlefield of whispered alliances and shifting loyalties. Meetings multiplied, security tightened, paranoia bloomed. And through it all she remained calm. She followed the new rules. She limited her movements. She spoke only when spoken to. She became invisible again, exactly when invisibility was most dangerous. At night she lay awake listening to the house unravel. She thought of her family, of names erased, of lives crushed quietly under deals signed in rooms like this one. This was not revenge driven by rage. This was correction. The kind one sought her out one evening, unannounced. He looked exhausted. His carefully maintained warmth cracked around the edges. "This has gone too far," he said. "It has only begun," she replied. "You will destroy everything." She met his eyes. "Everything you built was already destroying others." He shook his head. "You do not understand what you are unleashing." "I understand exactly," she said. "That is why I am not afraid." He left without another word. By the end of the week, the House of 11 no longer felt like a symbol of dominance. It felt like a trap. One they had built for themselves. One master isolated, another under investigation, two at war, one watching silently, calculating exits, and she at the center of it all, untouched. The first fall had happened. The others were inevitable. And somewhere deep in the walls, beneath marble and money and fear, the foundations of their empire continued to crack, slowly, quietly, beyond repair. 3 more fell in rapid succession. The careful one, the diplomat, the man who had proposed joint ownership. He was caught in a lie about offshore accounts. The lie was small, but it unraveled larger truths. By the time investigators finished, his reputation was destroyed, his political connections severed, his business partners distanced themselves overnight. The younger one, the restless one, he made a desperate move, trying to salvage what he could. He reached out to competitors, offered information, tried to broker protection. But the information had already been leaked, by someone else to different people. He was outmaneuvered, outplayed. He left the estate in the middle of the night. No one saw him again. The one who hid behind kindness. His charities were exposed as tax shelters, his foundations as vehicles for laundering reputation. The scandal broke slowly. Then all at once, donors withdrew, investigations opened. He resigned from every board he sat on. Within a month he was invisible. She watched it all from her window, from the library, from the quiet corners where no one thought to look for her. The house staff began to change. Some left without explanation. Others stayed but stopped making eye contact with the remaining masters. The house manager aged visibly, his face drawn, his hands unsteady. He stopped reassuring anyone. The efficient one remained, the 8th master, the dangerous one. He had insulated himself better than the others. His operations were compartmentalized, his records sanitized, his networks independent. He was the last wall standing. He summoned her one final time. They met in the study, the room with the screens. He sat behind a desk. She stood. "You have been very thorough," he said. She said nothing. "I underestimated you. That was my mistake." She still said nothing. He leaned forward. "You think this is over. You think you have won." "I think," she said slowly, "that you built something fragile and called it strong." His jaw tightened. "You will not leave here. You understand that." She smiled faintly. "I already have." He frowned. She gestured to the screens behind him. He turned. The feeds showed empty corridors, empty rooms. The estate was emptying. Staff were leaving. Security was absent. The carefully maintained facade was collapsing in real time. When he turned back, she was gone. The door was open. The hallway beyond was silent. She walked through the house one last time, past the rooms that had held her, past the corridors where she had been watched, past the doors that had been locked and unlocked according to someone else's schedule. She reached the main entrance. The front door stood open. Rain was falling outside, light and steady. She stepped into it without looking back. A car waited at the end of the driveway, not the black armored one from before. A different car, smaller, unremarkable. The driver was a woman, middle-aged, familiar. It was the maid who had whispered to her weeks ago. "Thank you," the woman said as she climbed in. She nodded. The car pulled away. The gates closed behind them. She did not look back. 3 months later, the estate was sold at auction. The remaining masters had scattered, some to other cities, some to other countries, some had disappeared entirely. The house was purchased by a developer who planned to tear it down and build something new. The scandal had spread beyond the 11. Investigators had followed the threads she had carefully laid. Connections to political figures, to corporate boards, to financial institutions. The web was larger than anyone had suspected, and once it began to unravel, it could not be stopped. She watched the news from a small apartment in a city where no one knew her name. She watched the reports, the arrests, the resignations, the quiet dismantling of systems that had seemed untouchable. She did not feel satisfaction. She did not feel revenge. She felt only the quiet certainty that came from understanding how power worked and how it could be undone. The 11th master, the one who had watched from a distance, the patient one, he found her 6 months later. She had expected him to. They met in a public place, a park, daylight, people walking past, safe. He sat beside her on a bench. He did not speak immediately. They watched the fountain for a while, water falling, light catching in the spray. "You were right," he said finally. "About what?" "That we built something fragile." She nodded. "I lost everything," he said, "but I also learned something." She looked at him. "That power without accountability is just borrowed time." She considered that, yes. He stood. "I will not look for you again." "I know." He walked away. She watched him disappear into the crowd. She thought about the House of 11, about the men who had believed they could own another person, who had believed their wealth insulated them from consequence, who had believed that compliance could be purchased. They had been wrong, not because she was special, not because she was extraordinary, but because they had underestimated the most basic truth, that every system of control contains the seeds of its own destruction, that every structure built on exploitation eventually collapses, that patience and observation and precision could accomplish what force never could. She stood and walked toward the edge of the park. The city stretched out before her, vast and indifferent and full of possibility. She had been many things, property, commodity, asset, but she had never been those things, not truly. She had been waiting, learning, planning. And now she was simply herself, free, invisible, ready for whatever came next. If you found this story powerful, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from? What resonated with you? Your voice matters. Until next time.